later on. So, ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and a warm welcome to the fourth US-Austria Citizens Dialogue on Global Challenges. Tonight, we gather to explore a topic that touches the very structure of our societies: humans and machines, the future of work in the age of AI. We are witnessing a profound shift. Artificial intelligence is not only reshaping industries, it is changing how we define work, how we learn, and even how we interact with one another. Let me ask you, with a quick show of hands, how many of you have seen recent news articles on the impact of AI on jobs? Okay, I can see you're following. You're following the news, and I think it is probably one of the biggest challenges that our societies are going to face over the next few years. Last week, Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, one of the leading AI companies, warned that artificial intelligence could automate up to 50% of entry-level white-collar jobs within 5 years. We are not talking about science fiction. We are talking about roles in finance, in law, in administration and consulting, jobs that many young people train years to enter. A follow-up report the very next day raised another concern. AI is already contributing to rising unemployment among recent college graduates, who are seeing the ground shift beneath them as entry-level opportunities begin to shrink or change form entirely. Just yesterday, I read that the unemployment among coders is even higher than among those with other fields of studies. So, big challenges ahead. And these developments are a wake-up call. They challenge us to think critically. How do we make sure that AI augments human potential rather than replaces it? How can we maintain jobs and prepare young people for a labor market shaped by algorithms, automation, and digital assistance? And what role should governments, educators, and civil society play in guiding this transition? These are the questions that we'll explore together tonight with the help of our distinguished keynote speakers and you, the audience, because, and this is the premise of our citizen dialogue, global challenges can only be overcome if state and civil society work together. We begin and open our event by inviting our host, the Vice-Rector of the University of Vienna, Professor Nikolaus Hautsch, to deliver his opening remarks.
So, very warm welcome from my side. AI is the buzzword when we think about innovation, about technology, future developments. So I'm Vice-Rector for infrastructure. I'm responsible for the infrastructure, all the buildings and the rooms, also the research infrastructure. And given that I'm a professor in finance and statistics, so statistics, one of the pillars of AI, so I'm also deeply connected to AI and all the developments, what we do at the university. So AI plays an integral part in the university strategy, touching nearly every part of our operation. So let me tell you a little bit how we think about this and what we do, which is closely connected to the topic of this evening. So, as already mentioned, when we think about teaching, the way we teach is dramatically changing. Students change the way how to learn, exams have to change, assessments have to change, AI assistance has to be taken into account. So we have to change our curricula, we have to change our rules, we have to change our regulations. Our classical systems are under threat. In research, however, AI opens up new possibilities. AI accelerates data processing, pattern recognition across disciplines in science, humanities, social science, economics, everywhere. Tools like semantic search or AI-powered summaries help researchers stay up to date. AI models quite complex systems in climate research, in economics, in biology, in medicine, in physics, everywhere. So I'm always impressed. So we are a big university, so we nearly have all fields under the roof. I'm impressed how much AI is creeping in everywhere. Of course, also in administration, also there. It's an opportunity, but it's also a challenge. A challenge in the sense that it raises questions of ethical guidelines, of data protection. So I'm also in charge of data protection, of privacy, cybersecurity. These are huge challenges, of course, not only for universities, but also for companies. We as a university, however, we must play an active role in shaping AI, shaping a world with AI, leveraging the potential of AI while protecting ourselves against the risks of AI. And I can tell you in Vienna, there's a lot going on in and around AI. For instance, Boehringer Ingelheim made a significant investment over the next decade into a new AI center. It's called Athera in the area of life science, biomedical research. So the Vienna Biocenter, the campus there is strongly benefiting now from the possibility of bringing high-profile researchers in AI and data science now to Vienna, fostering excellence and innovation. We, as the University of Vienna, together with the technical universities now, we are just building up an AI center with the aim of making Austria, small country, but nevertheless to make it visible on the landscape, not only of AI applications, but also AI methodology, AI development. So we plan to hire top-level professors in the area of AI methodology, surrounded by younger professors, tenure-track professors in various application fields. So a center for excellence where we hope that this will attract further top researchers. So we want to be part of it. So we do not only want to be the users of it. Moreover, we also as a part of a consortium together with the Technical University, the Austrian Institute of Technology, we are just about building up an AI factory funded by the EU. 50%, national co-funding, the other 50%. A supercomputer will be built up together with AI services, serving SMEs, industry. So really on the borderline between universities, between research and industries. Very important for a small country like Austria. And of course, there we will get in touch with the topic of the evening. So finally, we leverage on expertise in what we call digital humanism. So shaping a world with AI. So trying to find answers on these questions. How much ethics do we need? How much regulation do we need? What is the future of work? What are the risks of AI, discrimination, biases, lack of accountability, manipulation of media and news, uncontrollable self-aware AI? I mean, this sounds very negative, but one has to be honest. I mean, there's a great potential on the one hand, but there are also big challenges. And I think this is particularly true for the future of work. So I'm very happy to have you here. A very warm welcome at the University of Vienna. I'm looking forward to exciting keynote talks on a really hot topic, very relevant topic, and a fruitful exchange this evening. So thank you very much for coming, and I wish you a nice evening.
Thank you very much, Vice-Rector Hautsch. I can say that we should probably have invited you as a third expert here to hold a keynote, but perhaps in the Q&A session we might use your expertise a bit further. It is now my pleasure to invite Ambassador Regina Rusz. She's the Director General for International Cultural Affairs at the Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs, to take the floor, please.
Thank you very much, dear guests. I must say I'm not an expert, so my opening remarks will be quite short that then you can hear the experts very soon. I also would like to welcome you, and I'm very happy that so many of you have come here today to join us for the 4th US-Austria Citizen Dialogue on Global Challenges. Of course, I also want to thank our host, Vice-Rector Nikolaus Hautsch, as well as Counselor Elizabeth Martin-Shukrun from the US Embassy and her team. Together we have organized also this event today, and we are very happy that we can continue this very valuable partnership with you. Of course, I'm also pleased to welcome our experts, Professor Richard Harknett and Dr. Daniele Angelini, and my colleague Alexander Rieger, who will be also our moderator today. And he has coordinated, together with the US Embassy, this dialogue. We launched this series together with the US Embassy almost a year ago. And our idea is to include you as citizens of our countries in this dialogue about critical topics. And today's focus, Human and Machines, touches on these very pressing questions about the future of work, ethics, and also society. I can also say that the Austrian Foreign Ministry is very active in the global AI discourse, and we are also very active in the framework of digital humanism. And the idea of digital humanism places human dignity and agency at the center of technological development. Especially through our Cultural Affairs Directorate, we play an active role. And on this occasion, I can also mention, for quite a long time, we have a very close cooperation with the Ars Electronica Festival in Linz, a lot of you might know this festival, and where we created an award, the Digital Humanity Award, which honors innovative projects that promote a human-centered approach to technology and digital transformation. And we are also very active on the international stage. I can give you a few examples. For example, Vienna serves as a hub for multilateral digital policy. There are UN organizations here, the OSCE. And on EU level, we also have been active in shaping the AI Act, and where it is very important also in this AI Act to put an emphasis on democratic values and ethical safeguards. And we think that the theme of today's discussion is a very important one. And we all know, and that's what also our speakers already said today, AI poses great risks, but also opportunities on our labor market. And I think we especially owe it to our younger generation that we equip them with digital skills, but also with critical thinking and ethical awareness. And I think I'm happy that maybe this tonight discussion can contribute to that goal. So I'm also forward-looking to the discussion, and I'm very also happy then to hear you and your insights, and I'm looking forward also to a very lively discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Rusz, for your thoughtful remarks and, of course, for the continued support for this dialogue. Last but certainly not least, I would like to welcome Ms. Elizabeth Martin-Shukrun, the Counselor for Public Affairs of the US Embassy in Austria, to share a few words.
Thank you so much, Alexander, for the introduction, and thank you, Vice-Rector, for hosting us here at the University of Vienna, and of course to all of our colleagues, Ambassador, and from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that we've been collaborating with on this project now for a little bit over a year. We're really so pleased to be able to continue to have this area for transatlantic citizens dialogue continuing now with the new government here in Austria and the new administration in the United States. The idea, as the ambassador was mentioning, behind this whole citizens dialogue is to bring together leaders, thought leaders, learners, and innovators to tackle some of the most important questions of our time. And I think few topics are as current or more fascinating than tonight's, the future of work and the age of AI. We're really at a remarkable moment right now, as artificial intelligence is already reshaping the way that we live, the way that we learn, the way that we labor. Algorithms curate the information we see, they optimize the goods we receive, and they are increasingly collaborating with us in how we work and how we create. For some of us, and I count myself among them, this can be a little overwhelming. I'm sure for the rest of you, it's totally normal. But it's also empowering. And our Vice President, J.D. Vance, recently said, AI will never replace human beings. It will make us more productive, more prosperous, and more free. And that's really the bold and optimistic vision of the United States right now as we are pursuing this policy with urgency and care. Just last month, President Trump signed an executive order launching a national initiative focused on AI education and workforce readiness. It recognizes the simple truth. The jobs of tomorrow are not about humans versus machines, but about humans and machines working together. To meet that future, we're expanding apprenticeships, we're supporting teacher training, and working with industry to shape practical pathways into AI-powered fields. And this isn't just for students. This is also for lifelong learners, for workers and communities across our nation. The age of AI is not just about what machines can do, but it's about what we choose to do with them. It's about building a future where artificial intelligence enhances human dignity by relieving people of repetitive or routine work and allowing them to focus on those things that only humans can solve, solving problems, thinking creatively, and caring for one another. It's about expanding opportunity so that more people in more places can access good jobs, learn new skills, and contribute meaningfully to their communities. And it's about driving innovation, using AI to improve how we design, build, teach, and discover. And finally, it's about ensuring that the deployment of AI strengthens our economies, it supports our national security, and reflects our shared democratic values. AI is also an opportunity that we see for international collaboration. The future of work is not an American story or an Austrian story. It can be a shared global chapter that we write together. Austria and the United States enjoy a strong bilateral partnership that goes beyond just our two governments. It's cooperation between our businesses, our universities, our researchers, and our students. Together, they are pushing the boundaries of science and technology. Universities in Austria and the United States are conducting critical research in fields like like artificial intelligence and quantum computing, discoveries that will shape not just our economies, but our societies and our shared future. So this idea of machine and people, it's these people-to-people connections that we foster between our two countries through exchange programs like Fulbright Austria, which is celebrating 75 years just this year, and through citizen dialogues like this one. These people-to-people connections can serve as a foundation, both for scientific breakthroughs in AI and other fields, and for looking at the economic, political, and civic policies that we need to help our citizens adapt to those new technologies. Tonight, we're privileged to hear from leading thinkers on these issues, Professor Richard Harknett from the University of Cincinnati and Professor Daniele Angelini from the University of Vienna. I'm very excited to hear you both. And we really hope that today's dialogue is just one step toward a future of more collaboration between Austria and the United States, between our scientists, our economists, our policy experts, as we continue to welcome the opportunities and address the challenges that are posed by AI together. Thank you once again to our hosts, to our partners with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, to our expert speakers, and all of you for attending. And with that, I'll turn the floor back to Alexander. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth, for your inspiring words. I think one thing that we in small foreign ministries hope is that AI will help cope more of the, or take over more of the administrative stuff so that we can focus more on diplomacy and actually talking to other people. Indeed. Anyway, let's move on. We now begin with our keynote speeches, and we begin with Professor Dr. Richard Harknett. Professor Harknett is a former Fulbright professor at the Diplomatic Academy of Vienna, one of the many cooperations that we have with the US. And he currently serves as co-director of the Ohio Cyber Range Institute and the director of the Center for Cyber Strategy and Policy in the United States. He has also served as scholar in residence at the US Cyber Command. With over 60 publications to his name, including the co-authored book Cyber Persistence Theory, Redefining National Security in Cyberspace from Oxford University Press 2022, Professor Harknett is a leading voice in cyber strategy. Please also note that Professor Harknett is speaking today in his academic capacity and not on behalf of the US government or any of its agencies. Richard, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Anthony. Well, good evening, everybody. It was 2001, and the U.S. Embassy sent me around Austria to talk about missile defense treaties. And so we're a little advanced 20 some odd years later. I'm going to try in a short span of about 22 minutes to feed your appetite tonight for dialogue. So the most important dialogue that has to happen tonight is the one that follows tonight, right? The argument I'm going to make to you is that we actually do, as citizens in democratic society, need to get voice and get agency around this issue so that we actually create policy frames that go in the direction that we want them to go into, right? That we want this tech to go, so that we're not purely in a tech determinism, right, as we go forward. So the first provocative thing I'm going to suggest to you is that we have to stop using the term AI. and artificial intelligence, because it's not really artificial anymore, right? I mean, if you actually understand the tech and how it is mapping towards the way that we actually think as humans. So I'm going to offer you a frame that I think is helpful if we want to start to have a policy dialogue, right? And that is to think about these as agents, to think about algorithmic agency and where do they fit in terms of roles and responsibilities in our lives, whether it be in our organizational life, whether it be in our personal life. So I am going to try to do this quickly because I'm standing in the way of you all getting some drinks. And as I said, honestly, this is about a dialogue that's got to begin, right? So, all right. So this isn't building, but I'll go with it. So first point. There's a big change happening, right? Note the verb, happening. It is not that it's going to happen. It is happening. There is labor dislocation occurring as we speak because of these algorithmic agents. And the biggest challenge that we face is that we are adopting this technology with very little time to think through the norms by which we are going to interface with this technology. So if you look at some of these differences, right, it took us 75 years from the first person who gets that telephone to the point at which we have 100 million people using that technology. 75 years, you get a little pacing, right? You get to figure out what's the legal structure, like when can the state intervene, right, in my communication over that telephone, right? And we adapt and we evolve there. Chappie, 2 months? You are not using this with any sort of norm, right? You're just using it. But we are creating a behavioral dynamic, right? Because of, in a sense, we're doing research and development in market, in life, right? We are part of a research and development project. Right? So we have to try to manage this time compression issue. Right? This is the most important with regard to the lack of policy and whether or not we're going to have policy intervene. So if I gave this talk to you in 1819, that's when my university started, right? Not old by your standards, but reasonably old by us. 72% of the US labor force was in agriculture. And we represented about 2% of the world economy, right? And so if I, as a professor, you invited me to give a talk about the future of work in 1819, and I got on that stage and I said to you that in about 200 years, 2% of our labor force is going to be in agriculture, and we will be the largest economy in the world. How quickly are you walking out of the room? Right? Expert? What is this? This is crazy. Right? So we have had dislocation before in human history. Right? We have shifted the modality of our societies, the core of that. And I would submit to you that we are in a fifth societal-wide shift in the modality in which we organize human life, right? We've done it before, but we did it with time, right? So if we think about the last big dislocation, the one that I just showed you, going from a more agrarian society to an industrialized society, right? Huge, huge loss of jobs. The difference there, the sector was pretty, it was essential to your economy, right? But it was one sector and the follow-ons to that. But that was core. to how you had organized your society, right? And we were able to absorb and adapt. We did it not well in certain cases, pollution, right? Child labor, right? Things of this nature. And it took time to figure out how we reorganized for this new technology that was driving economics, society, organization, about where we lived, right? We went from the farm, right, to the city. So we are now in this transition to the emergence of the algorithmic agent. I will go as far, might as well provoke, right? I will go as far as to suggest that the best way to think about this is that we are birthing a new species of decision maker. Let that sink in. Why do I put this in a decision-making mode? So you've all heard this terminology. Are we in the loop? Are we out of the loop, right? Are we on the loop? But nobody actually tells you what the loop is, right? So the loop is what we call the OODA loop, if you've never ever heard of that, right? Observe, orient, decide, and act. When we think about the basic fundamentals of human decision-making, these are the 4 steps that occur, right? We observe our surroundings, we orient ourselves to those observations, we then decide based on those observations or orientations, and then act, right? This is the loop. And so for really, really important things, and for most of human history, we've been in that middle part, right? The loop is us. We're the ones doing all 4 of those things. And then over time, we've developed technology to help us, right? So we can observe through glasses, right? If I didn't have these things on, you all would be this blurry mess, right? And that wouldn't actually help me orient to you, because I wouldn't know which one of you have already fallen asleep and which one of you are still listening to me, right? So we can leverage that technology to help us through these 4 steps. What I want to suggest to you is that we have to stop thinking about AI as a product, as a tool, as just a piece of code, right? And understand that these are algorithmic agents that we still can decide what roles and responsibilities are we going to give them relative to the OODA loop, right? So are we going to ask them to collect data for us? That's the observe, right? They're going to collect that data and analyze it for us? Are they going to collect, analyze, and then organize a decision tree of our best options? Or are they going to collect, analyze, organize those decisions, and then actually have the function of acting? Right? But I would submit to you that this is the dialogue we have to have around the emergence of algorithmic agents. Right? We have to start to think about this in terms of these roles and responsibilities that we will assign. Note and underline 3 times, we will assign. If we don't actually get on top of this fairly soon, note the 2 months of using a technology, 100 million people, creates a behavior, right? It creates a dynamic that ultimately starts to get rooted. We get like comfortable doing certain things. It's going to be hard to pull this back. And so this is one of the reasons why I think there's some urgency to the dialogue that you all have to have as citizens of democratic societies with your politicians, with the folks that you work with the media, etc. So let's talk about a couple of use cases of how would, if you buy my argument, that these are algorithmic agents, that we have to assign roles and responsibilities, how is that different than what we're doing right now, right? In terms of looking at this as purely code, tool, right, or software. So instead of talking about autonomous vehicles, right, an algorithmic agent framework says they're chauffeured cars, right? The algorithm is chauffeuring you, right? And who doesn't want to be chauffeured, right? Plus, I hate to tell you this, although, you know, Vienna, I've been here now 20 some odd years and haven't been hit by a car, because you guys have very, very good when to walk and when not to walk types of things. US, we're not so good about that. We hit a lot of people with cars. We're not really great drivers, right? And so why wouldn't we want a chauffeur, right, that's better at anticipating movements in front, right, can do it at a speed that's more like a race car driver than an average driver. If I could cut car deaths by 25%, why wouldn't I do that? Right? They're not going to be perfect. When we look at them from a software standpoint, we've been holding it to a standard that we don't hold ourselves to when we drive. Right? So if we change this to a model of agency, then it asks a very simple policy question. How do you license the chauffeur? Right? We license chauffeurs right now. We set up a massive, I'm not familiar with the Austrian system, right? But we have Department of Motor Vehicles in the United States, and at a certain age, you get to go and take a test, right? And you have to be licensed to be sufficiently skilled to drive this vehicle, right? We got, what, 330 million people. We've got 100 million plus drivers, thereabouts, right? It's a big system to license these folks. It's actually going to be easier to license the best algorithm that does driving if we actually set it up as a policy framework of licensure. Because once you have that code, it's trained, and you know, and here's the dilemma right now, you know what it's been trained on, right? So if we're going to go to a licensure model, you have to get to a transparency model, and we don't have that right now. Right? We're all going to live longer because of algorithmic agents. They're going to be able to synthesize information about our health in ways that we individually and doctors have never been able to do. If I gave you a choice, right? Got this pain, right? I go to the emergency room and I try to explain it, right, to this doctor. And am I really good? How many of you are really good explaining to doctors what's bothering you, right? But what if you were able to swallow a sensor at that point, right? And it was able to take every factor of health data that they needed right then and there to understand where the pain was, what was emanating it, what was possibly the cause, what your blood flow was, what your heart rate was, all of this type of stuff, and immediately put that in front of the doctor. I've already improved my chances of surviving whatever this pain is because the communication has become much better. I've digitized that communication, right? But now I'm going to have that human interpret it. But what if I had an agent that has read every medical article on that pain condition? Whose advice would you like to follow? The one medical agent that has experience with a couple thousand people, has read 20, 30 articles, you know, on it, or the agent that's read every article, right? And has actually been able to synthesize your data with a database of everybody who's been in that hospital in the last 20 years that has had the same data profile. You going with the more experienced one, or you going with the human? Because the more experienced one is the algorithm. by that time, by that stage. That's going to be not about licensure. That's going to be about, well, it's also going to be about licensure. It's going to be about trust, right? But why am I going to trust this algorithmic medical agent? I need to know where they went to school, right? What's the first thing that you know, why do doctors put their diplomas up on the wall? They're trying to tell you, relax, I got this, right? I'm going to show you very quickly that I've got some expertise in this. Now, you might have gone on the internet, you might have gone and read some reviews and all that kind of stuff. You might do your homework, that's fine, right? They may have been referred to somebody over time to you, fine, right? But that's what that diploma's for, right? It's to build trust in that moment. Again, if I don't know what school that algorithm went to, if I don't know what its training data, its code, its core learning process is, yeah, I'm never going to trust that, or I'm going to trust it less. But if we're going to actually want to put humans in a situation where they get to get their medical advice from the more experienced agent, then I've got to build that trust. And that's where a policy framework of thinking through normal roles and responsibilities and licensure comes to fore, right? So what legitimizes an expert? Right? This, to me, is one of the critical questions that you all have to have a dialogue about if you want to talk about algorithmic agency in 2025. Right? Is it practice and performance? I'm a huge Liverpool fan, so Mo Salah is up there for a reason. Right? So expertise can come from practice and performance. Right? So if back to my medical, right? A surgeon who's done that surgery many times, probably the one you want to go to if the surgeon goes, "Hi, Alex, this is going to be my first surgery. I'm so excited to have you as my patient," right? That's not going to be that great, okay? So we put a lot of weight on practice and performance. So part of what's going to happen with these algorithmic agents is that the more we use them, the more they're going to learn. Right now, they're teenagers. They're maybe middle school, right? So think about that. Students in the room that just like handed in a paper relying on this, you just relied on a middle schooler, right, for advice. They're going to get better, and they're going to get better very quickly, right? But I'm a big fan of this institutional accreditation, and I'm not saying that because the Vice-Rector is here, and we're doing this talk in a university, right? We have to figure out, if we understand this as agency, what's the basis upon which I'm going to assign that role? Am I just going to have it collect data? And it's going to be able to do that super fast, right? And super expansive. And maybe I decide that's the only thing I want it to do for certain for certain outputs, right? For certain human things, right? Like launching nuclear weapons. Like, let's throw that one on the table, since everybody goes there in their sci-fi, movie, right? Like, that's where I want to keep the human in the loop, right? Perhaps. But that assumes that the human doesn't make emotional decisions, right? That we need a few beers before we get into that conversation, right? So when we think about, so we place a lot of weight on institutional accreditation. I don't think we should abandon that model. I think we should think about how that model fits into algorithmic agency, right? And it's all about getting transparency into the training environment in terms of the actual education of these algorithms. And so the coder, as Alexander suggested, right? Think about that counterintuitive point. One of the biggest hits in the labor market this year, right, is entry-level coders, right? Algorithms have replaced software, first software development, right? So the computer has eliminated the computer job, right? Or one of the core elements of this, right? So is it going to be performance? Is it going to be accreditation? I will leave you with this. All right. The dislocation is coming. It's here. It's going to be expansive. It's going to be difficult for us to put our arms around this. This is one argument about how you do that. But we cannot do that if we deny the scale, scope, and speed of this change. Right? And that is significant because, and I don't want to put us a downer before Daniele gets up here, but I'll make this point. The dislocation in the labor market is going to be at the entry level, and it's going to be at the entry level white-collar job disproportionately to other types of fields. That is, if you understand that, from an economic standpoint, we are going to take jobs away from the people who are supposed to be going into the market to rejuvenate the market. Right? There are going to be pathways that get shut down. What we have to figure out is what are the pathways then that we open up. Because otherwise, AI is going to keep us around. We're going to get old, and we're going to have nobody working. Right? And that's a whole other social issue that we're going to be able to deal with. I'll skip over this in the interest of time. I will leave you with this picture, which is not AI generated. This is my cat, Elliot, interrupting a very important meeting, as you can see on the screen. But the difference between you and Elliot is just curious, right? Elliot is not reflective. Right? You all have to be curious and reflective. I look forward to having a little dialogue with you later. Daniele, over to you. Does that get?
Thank you, Mr. Harknett, for a fascinating and thought-provoking presentation. And I think all of us have many questions for you. We now continue with Dr. Daniele Angelini. Dr. Angelini is an applied theorist whose research explores the intersection of macroeconomics, labor economics, technological change, and demographic transition. His work examines how technological and demographic forces shape labor markets, economic growth, market structures, and inequality. He earned his PhD from the European University Institute and held a postdoctoral position at the University of Constance. And since October 2024, he has been a lecturer in the Department of Economics here at the University of Vienna. And you're almost at the age of an entry level, so we are very much looking forward to your perspectives. Thank you for coming, and you have the floor, Daniele.
Okay, thanks a lot for being here. Thanks a lot to the organizers. And well, this is my first keynote speech, but keynote speech is quite different from a surgery, so you can relax. Today I will talk about the Copernicus Revolution of artificial intelligence and the effects that introducing this novel technology can have on the labor market and on the economy in general. So what I call the Copernicus Revolution of artificial intelligence is fundamentally this shift that we have experienced a couple of years ago in the way that we communicate with the machine. So while yesterday, in order to communicate with the artificial intelligence, we needed to acquire some costly skills. We had to learn how to program. Today we can talk to the machine using our language, our natural language. This leads to a mass adoption, or has the potential to lead to a mass adoption of artificial intelligence that can actually revolutionize the labor market. So artificial intelligence is a fast-spreading type of technology. In a couple of years, ChatGPT has already between 500 and 800 million weekly users. It's widespread in education, in writing. It helps coders to code. It's widely used in corporates, in the health sectors, in which it's used in order to support diagnosis, in order to it helps in innovation and to develop drugs. It's all the investment in this sector are expected to decuplicate in the next decades, as well as in the finance sector, where artificial intelligence is used in order to detect frauds and also to provide measures of risk. It's also used in media and content creation. We all know that artificial intelligence is able to write, is able to edit text, is also able to generate images and shoot videos. So how this technology will affect the economy? So different economists in different fields answer different type of questions. So macroeconomists try to understand the effects of artificial intelligence on productivity and on economic growth. There is a big debate here, and the debate is whether artificial intelligence will have an explosive effect on labor productivity, on economic growth, or if this effect will be marginal. And we still don't know. And we don't know because we are at the very beginning of this technological change. And our models rely on assumptions that are not empirically tested. So depending on which assumption we agree on, then our models give different results. Labor economists are trying to understand whether artificial intelligence is a complement to labor or a substitute to labor. Labor economists are trying to understand whether artificial intelligence will be able to automate non-routine cognitive tasks as routine physical tasks have been automated by robots and routine cognitive tasks can be automated by ICT, software, and computers. Let's assume that artificial intelligence will be able to automate this type of tasks, these non-routine cognitive tasks that until yesterday they were in the domain of humans. Only humans could perform this type of tasks. What will be left for humans? So this type of economists are trying to understand what is the comparative advantage of humans with respect to the machine. Macro labor economists try to understand how artificial intelligence will affect the labor market inequality. They distinguish between AI complement and AI substitute workers, and here is clear the effect. Artificial intelligence complement workers will increase their productivity, while artificial intelligence substitute workers will lose out their jobs. So this will increase inequality. There is another mechanism that is less studied, that is coming from the demand side. And economists are trying to understand what would be the role of education. How easy will it be to become an AI complement type of worker? And here is where the Copernicus Revolution of artificial intelligence hits. Moreover, what will be the role of education if we are approaching an economic singularity? An economic singularity defined by Nordhaus as the situation in which machines will be able to produce every economic activity better than humans. What would be, at that point, the role of education? Finally, industrial organization economists are trying to understand whether artificial intelligence will affect competition. Are we in a winner-take-all type of competition? Will this lead to an elite type of society? The problem about the uncertainty that we are facing today are rooted in the way that we imagine artificial intelligence. Going back to in the 50s and 60s, different authors have a very different idea of what artificial intelligence final form would be. So Isaac Asimov had let's say, a positive view of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence was complementing humans. And this is because machines were ruled by the rules, by the laws of robotics. So artificial intelligence was fundamentally substituting labor in those tasks that were dangerous and that were routine, leaving the good jobs to humans. So the key in order to understand the positive contribution of artificial intelligence to humanity was the fact that humans stayed in control. For Philip K. Dick, artificial intelligence was instead a more than perfect substitute to humans. It was like humans. You couldn't even distinguish androids from humans, but just better in performing all the economic activities and also the emotional type of tasks. So artificial intelligence, according to K. Dick, could replace humans. Well, today debate, I think it's still quite far from giving an answer to whether we are in this Asimov world or this Philip K. Dick type of world. Two big names in the economic profession, Professor Aghion and Nobel Prize winner Professor Acemoglu, have a quite different view of what artificial intelligence is and how this would affect labor productivity, economic growth, inequality. Accordingly to Aghion, there are large gains coming from artificial intelligence, and this is because the applicability of this type of technology is quite broad. And Aghion saw artificial intelligence as fundamentally complementing labor, and from this could lead to potential labor productivity gains that would also mitigate the negative consequences of artificial intelligence on inequality if the right institutions were put in place. Acemoglu has a, let's say, less positive view of artificial intelligence. His models predict that the effect of artificial intelligence on productivity will be smaller, will be more modest. And this is because the actual applicability of artificial intelligence is actually quite narrow. And where artificial intelligence can actually be used, this would lead to displacement of human labor and therefore an increase in inequality. So even if these two authors have very different view of artificial intelligence and the potential effects on the economy, they agree that some policy intervention, some institution needs to be put in place in order to govern the technological transition. And here I want to give my contribution, this Copernican revolution of artificial intelligence. As I said yesterday, we had to spend a lot of energy in order to learn how to code, while today coders are the ones facing risk of unemployment. Why? Because machines have learned our language. And since machines have learned our language, there has been a significant drop in the cost of acquiring the skills that allows us to be complementary to artificial intelligence. So this there has been a paradigm shift. Like Copernicus reversed the view of the cosmos, now we are facing a change in the way, a revolution in the way that we communicate with machines. And of course, this can lead to a mass adoption of artificial intelligence and a revolution in the labor market. So now I will show you a model that I use in order to, let's say, justify my prediction, educate my thought. Of course, I will not go through that. But it's just to show that there is some serious work behind this type of predictions. So this is a general equilibrium model. What is a general equilibrium model? It's a model in which the supply side, so where production occurs, and the demand side, so where agents decide which type of skills to acquire depending on the technological environment, and they interact, this demand and supply side. What we need to understand about this supply side is that this is a model that is widely used by Acemoglu and Restrepo, at least the supply side part. What is important here is that technology is endogenous. On both the extensive margin, so firms decide if automate a task using artificial intelligence, and also on the intensive margin. So artificial intelligence become more and more productive over time, depending on research investments. From the demand side, the household side, the important thing to remember is that there is endogeneity in the choice of acquiring skills. So agents react to changes in the technological environment, and they can decide whether not to acquire skills or to acquire those skills that would make them AI complement, or if the agent is is quite able, can also become an AI producer, a researcher. Okay, but let's directly go to the analysis. So let's consider the supply side, so where production takes place, and let's assume that there is an artificial intelligence type of innovation. This can be, for instance, a researcher that invents a novel way to automate a certain set of tasks. This will be an extensive margin type of automation, or just, the computing power increases, and therefore artificial intelligence will be able to provide faster solutions. The effect will be a higher adoption of artificial intelligence, higher labor productivity, and therefore higher growth. This would lead to an increase in the demand of artificial intelligence complementary workers, and this would also increase their wage. Okay? So we observe here a fundamental trade-off. Equality, growth trade-off. Economy growth, but inequality as well, growth. Okay? Let's see on the demand side. This Copernican revolution of artificial intelligence can be understood as an incredible drop in the skill acquisition cost to become AI complement. Okay? This implies that there will be an increase in the supply of AI complement workers, which also lower their wages. And since the cost of hiring an AI complement worker reduces, there will be a mass adoption of artificial intelligence. And the ones that will gain from this increase in the adoption of artificial intelligence will be the AI producers. Okay? Think of the big tech. And here we observe an increase in the inequality between those AI producers, the big tech, and AI users, workers. So given that artificial intelligence might lead to these negative consequences on inequality, economists tend to agree on the necessity of governing this technological progress, this technological change, exactly because artificial intelligence creates winners, AI complement workers, AI producers, and also losers. So those workers that do not possess the skills to use artificial intelligence. And also, economists agree to govern this type of technology, this change, because the labor market is increasingly failing to redistribute wealth. And this is because of the very nature of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a substituting type of technology, so it's an automated type of technology, so the labor share is actually declining. And the labor share is what is redistributed to the labor market to workers. And if this share is declining, then there is a lower scope for for the labor market to redistribute wealth. A possible solution has been that has been proposed is to tax robots in order to provide, for instance, a universal basic income. However, I want to make some warnings regarding taxing artificial intelligence and robots. This would jeopardize the incentives to innovate. This would lead to slower production growth. This would also disincentivize workers to acquire the complementary skills to artificial intelligence, and further, this will slow down the innovation process. And this is something that might be extremely risky, especially in this geopolitical type of competition, since it's likely that the AI winner will take all. So here we observe a clear trade-off between the social needs that push for a higher redistribution and this geopolitical competition that pushes for increasing the speed of innovation in order not to lose the geopolitical competition. So, to summarize, artificial intelligence has the potential to revolutionize production and labor markets. However, evidence is still scarce, and our models are still work in progress. There is a general agreement on policy intervention, but there is a disagreement on how to intervene exactly because of the existence of these trade-offs. How to prepare to the AI revolution that is already happening. So yesterday, we were told to study science, to study STEM, to learn how to code. Well, that has proven to be not a great strategy. because this Copernicus revolution of artificial intelligence reduced the cost of acquiring the complementary skills to artificial intelligence. So first of all, you will need to be able to use artificial intelligence, assuming that everybody else will. Analytical skills will be most likely still essential, but probably not sufficient. An interdisciplinary type of mindset will be necessary, as artificial intelligence will change most of the industries, and then as a worker you will need to find a creative way to apply artificial intelligence to your task, to your job. Soft skills such as communication, adaptability, judgment, those will become increasingly pivotal. And since artificial intelligence is changing over time, is still evolving, and still we don't know the final form of artificial intelligence, lifelong learning will be very important. And also the ability to learn how to learn. So, let me wrap up. Let me just conclude. There are other important things that I didn't consider in this talk, but I think that they need to be taken into account for a wider type of discussion. For instance, demand constraints. So let's assume that doctors are complementary to artificial intelligence. And let's assume that their productivity will increase exponentially, given the innovation that we are experiencing in AI. How many doctors will be needed? So here the idea is that there are some rigidities in the demand. Maybe only one doctor, the most talented doctor will be needed. Maybe talking about doctors is not the best example because health is kind of a very important issue, but think of graphic designers. The productivity of graphic designers increased tremendously through artificial intelligence. And still, we observe a reduction in the wages of graphic designers and a reduction in the commissions and a reduction in the employment levels of this type of workers. Artificial intelligence also is very environmentally costly. So 0.6 liters are needed to cool down servers to produce an AI-generated image, a single AI-generated image. However, on the bright side, artificial can boost innovation and can help humanity to give some solution for this, for the environmentally sustainable growth, or even to cure diseases. So also here you can see some trade-offs between short-run AI-driven costs and long-run gains. So with this I conclude. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Daniele. Please stay on stage. Richard. So I think we've had two very interesting, very complementary presentations, providing different views on a topic that will dominate our societies over the coming years. We have about half an hour now for the Q&As. At the back, you will see my two colleagues, Katharina and Valentina. One please to the left, one please to the right. And I will exercise my privilege as a moderator to ask the very first question to both of my speakers. What is it that we can recommend young people at the age of 16 to 18 so that they become AI complementary, so that whatever they study will actually, hopefully, provide them with a future in the workforce? And I will start with Richard.
Start with a simple question, yeah?
Of course.
Is this still on? Yeah? Okay. So I would agree with Daniele that we have to think about leveraging sort of holistic understandings of society and where we fit in society. So that is somewhat in the realm of the liberal arts and social sciences, right? So I think there's a counterintuitive outcome with the emergence of tech, in which, as again Daniele showed in some of the statistics, right, that right now I would not tell people to go into, software development coding, right? Except what will happen? We will need to adapt that discipline. That discipline's not going to disappear. And folks that are going to go in there are going to have to be the complement, right? So I agree with that term. I look at this, again, if you buy my notion of an algorithmic agent, we go to work with lots of different people, with lots of different backgrounds, and we need to be able to associate with them organizationally to achieve whatever objectives that we want to achieve, right? So if the algorithmic agent is something that I hire into my organization, not adopt into my organization, again, of roles and responsibility, I need to be able to interface and interact with that agent, this different form of decision-making. And so disciplines that understand how do you integrate complexity to make that decision-making model more effective, those are the disciplines. So I think we're going to invent new disciplines. Yeah, I mean, this may be the revolution of higher education that we're offering, right? Because look, we're still organized in medieval feudal constructs, right? Disciplines in departments that are in colleges, right? That are in separate, this is, we talk a lot about interdisciplinarity, but we've organized ourselves with regard to disciplinary expertise. So I think how education adopts and makes this interdisciplinary type of an approach more effective. So we're going to need to be responsive at the higher education level to produce those kinds of career buffers that you're talking about.
Very good. Daniele?
So let me tell you what I did. Maybe it was 2 years ago in one of my classes in I taught a course in artificial intelligence, technological change at the University of Constance a couple of years ago, and I decided to organize a little context among my students. There were very few students. I cannot do it here at the University of Vienna. But I told them, by next week, you write a song, and then we will play it in class. Of course, I didn't tell them to use artificial intelligence to write the song. That was implicit. And then I had the pleasure to listen to these 8, 9, 12 songs. Not everybody participated. It was on a voluntary basis. And they were quite bad, I have to say. Until one guy put on these songs, and the song was fantastic, was very good. And then I asked him, wow, that was a very good song. How did you make it? I mean, well, I used Suno. That's an application, an artificial intelligence that is able to produce music, starting from lyrics. I put my own lyrics. I guided the AI into the style of music that I wanted to produce, and then this was the final outcome. So this is what I mean when I say AI complement. Everybody can produce a song. Everybody can produce a bad song. But it takes some art, even using AI, to produce a good song. So what I would say to students at this point is really to still develop your own critical thinking, and then use artificial intelligence in that aspect of your life. And play with it, enjoy. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you, Daniele. So let's start with the public. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and our ladies will choose. Let's start with the left side of the room. Well, or the room.
So I had a question that I wanted to ask because it was an aspect none of you addressed. But then I saw your last slide. Professor was Angelini. The ChatGPT answer to the environmental costs. It said it takes 0.6 liters to cool a data center. Liters of what? Was that the ChatGPT answer? It doesn't tell you gas, water?
0.6 liters.
It makes a difference. And it's also only one facet of the environmental cost because it's building the data centers, it's powering the data centers, it's much, much more than cooling. Is it, cooling for AC? Is it cooling for water? And, are people going to lose the ability to spot that? Because we're going to just be stuck in this sludge of relying on these artificial fast food answers? This is my,
No, I agree. I didn't mean to provide a full assessment on the environmental cost of...
But it doesn't even say for the one aspect, the liters of what? It has to say liters of what? Oil, gas, water?
I absolutely agree. That should
it didn't even say that. So
that
anyway,
have been written
this is my concern with, and that's not even getting into the hallucinations. The other question, my real question was, I'm going to encapsulate it in a nutshell with an example of a friend I talked to last Friday. Up until a year ago, she had a thriving freelance business, editing and translating. And her work was on the web. She was hired by her clients, by corporations who put her work on their websites, and this work was scraped by the web crawlers, by Meta, and by all these AI companies without copyright, without authorization, without her permission. They feed it into the large language models. And now her business has crashed. A year later, it's almost to zero because everyone's using AI. So not only did it steal her work in the first place, it's now using it to put her out of business. And I didn't see the stolen work aspect. We're just like, oh, it's here. It's like the horse out of the barn, and it's like going cars. Well, kind of only if somebody came and stole all your horses, turned them into glue, and then you have to buy the glue to power your car. And you have to buy a car. So I don't know, we're kind of saying it's here, but it's based on things that our ethical laws and copyright laws didn't keep track of. And I'm just wondering if you could say something to that stolen theft aspect of, and how do we get that horse back in the barn? How do we, I don't want to be compensated for AI splinters of my work. I want the right to say how it's used.
So can I just jump in real quick? So the one slide that I skipped over was a piece of legislation, just as an exemplar, from the state of Connecticut in the United States. And it talks about, so I would have gotten into that discussion, it was just a matter of time. So let me take your question or prompt and just throw out a few things. This is why I'm arguing for this policy perspective, right? And the fact that we need to actually engage in what you just said, right? Theft is theft. So if, and so you do have, there are lawsuits, New York Times, for example, and other media outlets. So there is some legal effort going on, right, to adjudicate some of these types of training aspects, right? And so if you buy my policy frame of that we need to get into licensure, the only way you get into licensure is how they're being educated. And if you get into how they get educated, whether they're stealing copyrighted information, right? So the University of Vienna or the University of Cincinnati can't have a curriculum that's based on stolen material, right? We have to either generate it ourselves or we cite where it comes from. Now, of course, there's this whole problem with where the large language models are right now in hallucinating citations. And we have legal briefs that are being produced that are full of mistakes. That's why I suggested these are middle schoolers that are replacing paralegals right now in terms of their skill sets. So again, these are very, very important issues. That's why this policy discussion has to occur. And to tie it to your environmental question, this is the one thing that, in a counterintuitive way, I'm not suggesting stress on the environment is a good thing, but it is actually going to slow down some of this, because the aquifers that have to be drained and the energy that needs to be produced to actually accelerate the growth in both AI chip making and in these models are going. We don't have the electric grid in the United States to actually deliver right now the next iteration of this. So you're going to actually have 20th century industrial age infrastructure slow down 21st century innovation. I argue that we should take that as an opportunity, right? And that's where the policy debate needs to fit in. So that's going to be the one pause, because we actually don't have the electric grid to do the next step function in algorithmic development.
Very good. Next question, and 2 points, please. Introduce yourself and please keep the questions short so that everybody has the opportunity to get some input. Please.
Oh. Thank you very much. My name is Heinz Löber. I am a long retired international lawyer, and found, of course, this presentation most exciting. I'll try to keep it short. My comments and the question. You explained the change in over ages from simple workers on the land and the farms, then in the age of industrialization. And that age of industrialization also changed our political system and our societal system, of course. Now, AI presents, I think, in various respects, difficult situations in our democratic systems, influences on cybersecurity, distribution of fake news, etc., and the question of how people and the society, members of our society, form their opinions. That I think has changed. So could you, do you have opinions and views? How will AI change our democratic system? What should be pursued to have our democratic systems to survive? That would be then my question, which probably many people think about. Thank you.
You want to go first? You brought up geopolitics, and I'm the international relations guy. So.
I think that let me say I'm an economist, macro labor economist. So this debate really fascinates me, but I'm not an expert on that, especially on this particular topic. But I do have opinions regarding that, and I think that today's geopolitical competition that is occurring and this threat of the AI winner will take all will probably undermine the weight, the relevance of democracy. I mean, in the sense that, unfortunately, there will be, as I said, there is this big trade-off that I could identify even in this model, and the trade-off is between the social needs to maintain some social peace, so to try to mitigate the inequality that artificial intelligence will necessarily increase, and this race in order to become the AI winner. And the goal of our democracy will be to try to balance these two needs. Because losing the geopolitical competition might have tremendous type of implications. And I'm not sure which one is the strategy to pursue, but this is, I mean, I think this is probably the single most important question in the next, well, I don't know, 10, 20 years, let's see.
So I'll just be a little less optimistic. We don't have 10 years.
Indeed.
So there's one statement that President Vladimir Putin has said that I agree with. One. And that is that whoever wins the race in AI will define the second half of the 21st century. Right. So you're exactly right. There's a geopolitical overlay to this. The People's Republic of China have a national strategy objective to dominate both the infrastructure as well as the software side of this competition. And so we are in a fundamental contest over how one organizes society, right? There is a world set of actors that believe that at a base level, the individual should serve the state, if you boil it down, right? It's an authoritarian vision of societal order, security, maybe actually more economic equity, right? But it is fundamentally one that says we're going to leverage technology so to ensure that the individual serves the state. And then there's an alternative model, one that the two countries that are hosting tonight's dialogue still ascribe to, although some of you may not believe that. And that is that the state is supposed to serve the individual. Right? I think it is that fundamental. Right? Do we, and the technology that we have built for that modeling is really messy, right? Because individual empowerment is really messy. Because, and I don't mean this as an insult, we're all a little messy, right? Like we have our own views and we want to be able to express them. And what we've come up with is a governance system that allows for that to occur, right? And so as we entertain the introduction of algorithmic agents into our societies, it's incumbent upon us to use that mechanism to define the shaping of that technology in the direction in which the state, now add the technology, serves the individual. Right? That is the algorithmic agent that works side by side with me, replaces me on some mundane things, enables me in others. But that is not the model that Beijing and Moscow have for this technology. It is a technology model that says that the technology is going to stand next to the state, not next to the individual. And I think we are at that much of an inflection point in terms of defining where that shaping of technology goes.
So I believe we have a question right here.
My name is Jeff Manners. I'm a retired insurance executive who's worked primarily across Central and Eastern Europe over the last 40 years. One comment really struck me. I think it was yours, where you said, with AI, we have to see what jobs remain for the human. However, if we look at technological transformation in society, if we go back to your slide of 1819, many of the careers and jobs that exist today didn't exist back then. And anybody's wildest fantasies or not so wild fantasies, can you see of some new positions and jobs that AI may well create for us. If I may sneak in a second question, AI will make us highly productive. It may well reduce the need for workers and employment. Therefore, the distribution of wealth may well reside with those who own capital. What are the social implications of that? You were commenting on the relationship between the individual and the state. There is a third force, or maybe a fourth and fifth force there as well, the corporate world, which also needs to be balanced. And perhaps a few words on the implications of AI for the social structures and the distribution of wealth that this high productivity will create.
What was the first question? I'm sorry. Just
the first question is, well, you talked about the point that we have to look at AI and what jobs will remain for humans, but new technology has always created new positions as it's destroyed old.
No, I remember. Yes, thanks. Thanks a lot for the questions. So up to now, I mean, there is this idea that technological change will make human labor redundant in some tasks, but new tasks will be introduced in the economy. And this has been true for the first waves of automation, so the computerization, the robotizations. However, there has been a slowing down in the creation of new tasks. So while before the substitution of tasks from human to machines was, let's say, almost one-to-one replaced by the creation of new tasks, the creation of new tasks has been slowed down. And this is probably depending on the fact that artificial intelligence aim is to substitute, to automate non-routine cognitive tasks. Those are the tasks that are in the domain, at least until yesterday, of human skills. So really, creativity, problem solving, trying to adapt, try to learn, and this is exactly what artificial intelligence is doing. So I'm fairly not super optimistic about this channel in order to avoid this increasing in inequality, so the introduction of new tasks, exactly because of the nature of artificial intelligence that is somehow trying to mimic the human way of thinking, and therefore it would be able to substitute human labor even in those tasks in which, until yesterday, humans had a comparative advantage. It's not clear if this comparative advantage will be maintained in this set of tasks tomorrow. I mean, artificial intelligence is great in producing music, in writing poems, in writing text, in all this creative stuff that we should do, right? We want to do. But artificial intelligence has the potential to do that at a lower cost. Then I think what we need to do is to really think again on the role of the labor market and the role of institutions in order to redistribute wealth. And here, there is a difficulty, because the labor market was quite good in redistributing wealth until now. Why? Because, okay, the entrepreneur probably wasn't really using economic laws in order to pay the employee, but somehow those that weren't paying the employee accordingly to their productivity, they weren't maximizing their profits and they were kicked out from the market. So some laws of economics that were rewarding the good workers were in place in the society until today. But if the labor share, which is just the share that is redistributed through the labor markets to workers, is shrinking, exactly because the technology that we are talking about is a labor-saving type of technology, then the role of the labor market is becoming smaller. And then we will need to find new ways to redistribute. And which ways? Well, this is another big question. Yes.
Just two quick responses. So going back to that industrial age model, right? We decided, we made a policy decision to define the labor force, right? And restrict the use of children in certain societies, right? So if we're talking about hiring algorithmic agents, it is still the realm of the public policy space to define that labor market. That this is not an amorphous dynamic that's occurring. There are capital owners who are saying, making a business decision that I don't need coders anymore, or I don't need graphic designers anymore. That's still a human making that decision. It's based on market dynamics, but it's based on the fact that they have no regulatory constraint about making that decision right now, right? And as we industrialized and we pulled children into sweatshops and everything else, we decided, no, that's not the best use of children, right? Like, let's give them more time to get educated instead of manual labor. So we still can have public policy interface with the market. On jobs, real quick, so if the biggest opportunity that's out there is somebody who can come along and figure out how you can make safe and secure algorithmic agents. Because right now, in the development of the training environment, and I won't get too technical here, but we can, this one's over a beer as well. There's a tension between safe AI and secure AI. What it takes to make it safe, that is that it stays within the parameters of its original training objectives, would actually make it insecure. And the reverse, if I make it secure, i.e. I don't let you go back and reset it, you then therefore make it unsafe, right? So that's a big opportunity. The other I would say is psychology, right? Because in any age of massive dislocation, we need people who think through how humans interface with each other and with themselves and with organizations. And then we probably are going to need psychologists to talk to the algorithms. And there's a whole new discipline right there.
Very good. Last question.
Hello. Okay, thank you. My name is Ruth Poyman, and I'm not at all in this world, but I do work in the world of, I've done a lot of work for the ILO, the International Labor Organization, on skills, the future of work, preventing child labor, forced labor, human trafficking. So that's why I'm very interested in this. But I just wanted to go to what Dr. Harknett said just now. I'm also a mentee at the Diplomatic Academy, and I met with one of your students just now.
Oh, terrific.
So I think, and so I think a lot about that, and also I have a lot of friends who've lost their jobs this year. So a lot of people are thinking about what to do next. On the other hand, I just thought it was very interesting what you said just now about Russia and China. So my question would be more about that. We're also in a world of unprecedented, not only disinformation and misinformation, but also conflicts. Some people say we are in World War III. It's just they're pockets of conflicts, but we're all somehow engaged one way or another, including through technology. And you have the war nearby in Ukraine, where there are a lot of, there are a lot of technology. We just saw a big attack on Russia by Ukraine that was driven by technology. On the other hand, unprecedented number of people are dying in conflicts, more than ever in the history of mankind, and technology isn't stopping those deaths. And I was just wondering, what is the, like, if you know, technology becomes unethical and it's undemocratic, and say just a country like Russia gets to win the race on AI, what do you think the world will look like? Because Russia has cut itself off from the world in a lot of ways, including social media and internet, but it's also trying very hard to win the race, as you just said.
I'll go first and then give you the last word. So I like the messiness of democracy, yeah. But I think we have to become much more engaged. That's why I applaud both the Austrian Foreign Ministry and the Embassy of the U.S. for trying to get citizens to dialogue and talk with each other, right? We need this level of engagement because that's the capacity that we have against authoritarian structures, right? And I'm not talking about within our own political ideologies. I'm talking about fundamental structures, right, that say that we should organize society differently, right? We are facing a situation where if we are complacent, then we only have ourselves to blame, right? So there's still agency, you know, within this. On the conflict side, you know, I start my Intro to International Relations class off in 421 BC in the Athenian, Spartan, Peloponnesian War. We've been at this war thing for a really long time. It's really a shame, right? Because when you actually apply it from an economic standpoint, it's a really bad return on investment, right? It destroys things. It costs a lot. And the folks that initiate, if you go through international political history, the initiators actually have a losing record, right? So, you know, if we were real rational about that mechanism of adjudicating power struggles, we would move away from it. We did, to a certain extent, we froze, we used the word cold during the Cold War because we had a technology that overshot the utility of armed conflict, right, nuclear weapons. And so we had this unprecedented international political moment in which an empire collapsed without actual great power war. Right? The Soviet Union disappears in large measure because of the nuclear, you know, conundrum that existed between the U.S. and the Soviet Union. The interesting insight from Russo-Ukraine, I'll just throw this out to you to be slightly optimistic, is that the reason this has become a trench warfare without much movement is because of technological surveillance being tied in a scale, scope, and speed to battle space intelligence and then precision of weaponry. Basically right now on the Ukraine-Russo battle space, if you move, you're dead, right? So I don't know that that's going to resolve this conflict, but it does create pause for the next state who's thinking about adjudicating power struggles through war. So that's my half glass full end of the competition, that, you know, we sometimes we can learn from tragedy and from conflict, and it'll be interesting to see the insights from Russo-Ukraine. But the technology insight is that it is really, really hard to move. And if you can't move, then you really can't take territory. And if you can't take territory, then the basic fundamental utility of armed conflict starts to not look so appealing. And that's why you'll keep me. The other thing that you need to be employed in is cybersecurity, because we've based our entire technological infrastructure on an insecure architecture. So those people that actually study how to secure it, I think they've got a job for a little while.
So I will not directly answer your question. I think Richard has already properly answered, but I mean, I want to focus on one point. I'm not sure that democracy and technology are necessarily not compatible. I said that there are some social pressures driven by the technological challenge that might slow down technological innovation. But still, I don't think that more in general, a centralized system is more efficient than a decentralized one. And you can think of more centralized systems as more authoritarian type of countries, while in democracies there are some certain type of spillover effect that might actually lead to some advantages in the innovation process. And let's say that all authoritarian regimes that we had in history, at a certain point, they collapsed. I'm not sure how to define the China regime, the regime in China right now, but as population became richer, of course, they are demanding more freedom. And this implies that maybe if this process would somehow lead to an increasing wealth around the world, maybe it might be possible not even to end up in a worldwide type of conflict. So, of course, this is still more a hope than a proper prediction, but I mean, there is no reason to fully despair. Yeah.
So, thank you very much, all of you, for coming today. I think this was really a citizen dialogue. I think we had great speakers. I think we had a great exchange of opinion. Perhaps one final thought regarding the title Man and Machines. I recently read an article where one of the top CEOs was saying that he recommended we use at least 10% of our work time to work on AI, to understand AI, and to understand how to use AI, because as was said, it is coming, whether we want it or not, and I think the better deal is to be complementary AI than to be eliminated from the workforce. So in that sense, thank you very much, and please enjoy now the drinks and food, and thank you.
Thank you.
Daniele.
Thanks a lot.